Welcome to all of you. It's October the 12th in the US, in Las Vegas, where I am. And welcome to this very important session about real synergy and gender dynamics, intelligence. And welcome to those of you who are new to this group and many who are here before. We'd just like to welcome Barry, who's just popped in from the UK. Wave, Barry. And also Lloyd, who's been here before. Terry, who's not been here before. Lloyd is in America, in California. Is that right, Lloyd?
I'm actually in Houston, Texas.
Oh, sorry, Houston, Texas. Terry, who's in Malaysia, and Brian, who's in Seattle. We've got KB, Kabusha, and Shama, who you will see there. He's in the middle of India. Kenny, who's
Hi.
from England. Alan, who's coming at 2 a.m. in the morning from Australia, who's fantastic. Who did I get? Knut, who's coming from Portugal, etc., etc. So some of you have been here before, some of you are new. And our goal is to explore how men and women and masculine and feminine energy come together for real synergy. And as you note, I'm the only woman here, so I'm privileged to be here because I'm running the show. So and my passion, my passion is to achieve the ultimate harmony for men and women working together, living together, being together, but focusing on the energy in the business world because it impacts our life as well, as we are in pandemic and crisis mode. So I'd like to share my screen and actually show you a few ideas to get your thoughts going around what this may or may not mean before we have a conversation. And then we'll be able to introduce yourself. But I want to go through this first to get us focused on the idea of a new narrative. And this is very important. I didn't show you this last time, but what's really important is that there's a relationship between men and women. You know that, I know that, but often in the world it doesn't work out to be harmony. So if I know me, and I'm the only woman here, but I want to know what men feel about this world when it gets to the you and me, which is men and women coming together in all sorts of different ways to create the we community. So the goal is also creating, which is something I know that we are passionate about. Boris with MY-CEO is passionate about, and also Knut with Global Renaissance Society, and Alan in the Campfire Project, Kenny with yours. We all want to have our project focused on togetherness. So what does that mean? Now, I want this to be a magical conversation about creating our future together. So though we don't have women here, the women are meeting next Monday to discuss many of the same things. And the goal is to get together in November where we share the ideas that we're looking at here. So the idea of that circle is if I know me as a woman, and there are different types of women, and you know you as different types of men, how do we love each other? And I will bring the idea of loving, the love energy, as opposed to fear, and that we build communities which trust each other. And that is the goal, especially in crisis, because if we can't share honest emotions and experiences, we don't have a safe space to grow. So our goal, Philip and myself and Corporate Heart International, with all the work we do, is about understanding that women can empower men, and of course men can empower women. But there has been a huge amount of work on women over the last several decades, century, but certainly the last 3 decades that I've been involved about women empowerment, women empowerment, women empowerment. So taking the T off the end, I want to develop the relationship. And you are all what I would consider wise men, otherwise I don't think you would be here. And the challenge for us and for you is how do we take the message out there? How do we create a map which will help us understand all these words? Now, I'm not going to go through all these words, but these are all the words that the men who were here last time said about women and about men, and vice versa when I asked the women. Now, I'm going to send you these slides so you can explore these words. We did the same in Kuala Lumpur, where I met Terry, where we asked, how do men see women? How do women see men? Now, when you look through, there are some sensitivities in the words, and you'll see different energy flows. And this is the masculine and feminine. So I want to give you a very quick history story, and I want you to think about men as bears and women as birds. And the bears were in charge for a long time. You guys have been in charge. I don't mean you personally, but the world of men. And the women want to be there. We wanted the vote 100 years ago. Some countries only got the vote 50 years ago. But the bears were in charge for a long time. So I'm using this as a metaphor for how we understand the conversation when women have not been involved in business years ago. Now they are. But the bears maybe struggled to let the women in, the birds. And really there were different types of bears that we had to deal with. There was the really angry, tough bird bear. There was a really gentle panda bear. But of course, as you guys know, there's lots of different women. So maybe the birds were eagles sometimes, and sometimes macaw. And this is where I come into it, because I really wanted to understand myself in this journey. And I wanted to understand how men were dealing with each other. So I have interviewed over 55 men and asked them, how do you see the world as a bear? Are there angry bears? Are there the bears who caused us a lot of problems? Are there what I'm using as a softer, gentler bear? How did the bears run all this world together? And then how did they decide what to do with all these very different women? Now, I know that women are not all the same. The pelican may see the eagle as rather angry and too high, swooping in. The pelican is a very interesting bird because it collects the food in its beak and shares it with the community, something that women often do. The nature of women is hormonal and protective of their little ones. The macaw was the very pretty bird who was wanting to also be in business as well. So this metaphor, this story is about what happened when we all got together and the playing field started becoming even. Of course, as we have been in a period of increasing ego, everybody decided they were in charge. A lot of women decided that women empowerment was the way to go and that we needed to be in the boardroom with men. The bears and the birds sharing equally. But actually we all share the same world, and I believe that's what we're all about here, that we've got to work out how to use our intelligence and understand all the players. So my pitch for you is that I really would like you to understand this map in its essence so that we can talk about where are the misunderstandings and how can we get to real synergy. So as
I've got a question. Can I ask a question? Are there different kinds of bears? Because you have so many different women birds, but are there different bears?
Well, the bears are different in the sense that the bears are big and strong and were always the providers. So I picked bears in order to have an illustrative animal. So remember that this is, and thank you for the question, this is an illustration. In fact, the birds are much more complex. We could have picked 100 different birds. The reason I picked bears was the example of the difference between the strength of the bear and the fluidity and the flexibility of the bird. Is that all right for now? Let's come on to the map, but thank you for the question. If you asked a room full of women, what kind of animal are they? What kind of bird are they? They would all pick a different one. If you ask a group of men, they will tend to pick one animal. Very often that would be a lion, so we could use a lion. And what I wanted to do was just have a way of understanding the different behaviors. So let's come back to that when we see the whole map, but thank you for the question. So if we looked at putting this into a map, and this is my challenge to you, is how do we understand men generally are very good at tasks. The focus generally, and this is research from Dr. John Gray with Mars and Venus and many, many reports on the testosterone, the brain patterns for men tend to be about getting the task done. For women, it tends to be about relationship forming. So the idea by using these symbols, the square and the circle, are symbolic of the general nature of men and women. Now, what you've got to remember is that the larger circuit, i.e. the big circle, the big oval, is the map. So what we're looking at here is like men and women have a different operating pattern. So if you think about the square is more like a PC and the circle is more like a Mac. And we're looking at what are the programs that run between them. So as we look at masculine and feminine energy, and this is where it's important, is that masculine and feminine energy could be in all of us. And that's why I put this map together, because I wanted us to think about you as a man in that square of various types, various shapes, sizes, inclinations, personalities, experiences, and me in the circle as a woman in my own experiences, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a hormonal, childbearing woman, etc. But there's masculine, feminine energy is on top of that. So my energy happened to be particularly masculine. So when I looked at the map, I realized that if I was a masculine-minded woman, I was still in that circle, but I was picking up some of the energies and the conversations and the directness that I might see in a masculine-minded male. Now, if that's the case, then there are feminine-minded women and there are feminine-minded males. And this is totally about core behavior, because what I want to see is if we can create synergy, which is coming together of all parties, then the conversation is in the middle. And that's where, if we're to have a magical conversation, we need to understand the space which we all come into. So there may be a room of masculine males, and I know that some of you in here are masculine-minded males, and some of you are feminine-minded males, and we're going to have that exploration. We don't have any other women here other than me, but I am a masculine-minded female, but I'm also all the things that a female are. So if we were going to look at the mixture in the middle, the synergy in any one situation, it may be a room full of men, it may be a room full of women and men, or it may be a room full of women. There may be meetings where there are less women than men. How do those women feel? The classic evidence is that one woman on board with 12 men, it doesn't work. It needs to be at least 30% to 70% to get any kind of change in the culture of a mixed team. So how do men think, and this is open to your conversation, but men are more direct in their approach and women are a bit more like this. So I hope you like my illustration, because women are going to be working at a very, very different pace. So it's all about the navigation now, the translation and the synergy. So I'm going to open the floor in a minute, but I want to show you where the bears and the birds come in. So let's put those bears and birds on the map. And this is purely illustrative. You can change those animals. You can do whatever you like. But the main thing is the square is about task focused, which we need operationally. The circle is about the fluidity of relationships and technology. There's lots of ways that this map represents business. The masculine energy in any of us is more direct, logic, thinking, process. The feminine energy in any of us is indirect. We may use different energies in conversations. So if the plan is to create our future together, and this could be in a company, especially where they're looking at crisis management, they're looking at how do we create a new global society, what are we creating in the middle? We want to be able to encompass every different character. So the reason I've made this map pink and blue, just for illustrative purposes, to help you understand that the masculine and feminine energy is often portrayed in behavior in men and in women. Whether we don't have an understanding of that, there can be problems, as we've had in the past with marginalization of women in business and even the Me Too movement, a misunderstanding of what feminine and masculine energy is. And the person I always quote as a man with a strong feminine-minded energy is Nelson Mandela, who I felt as a leader was a very definitely male, but was very intuitive and able to be a servant leader as well as being very direct. So when you've got some archetypes, I've used the word magician for magical-minded, masculine-minded women, that's me, because the magician is in her head. So when you're dealing with a woman who is much more in her head, she's got that masculine energy, but she's a woman, she's going to be looking for some of the direct task-focused things you might want to see. But the feminine-minded female, the sovereign in the room, who's very protective and territorial, may not see your conversation in the same way. Likewise, the ruler, the masculine-minded male, who can be very positive or can be negative, can be seen maybe as the angry bear, but I'm not implying that you are those MMs on the call, who I'm going to invite in a minute to share. And the feminine-minded male, the panda, who is the philosopher. And when we look at these characters again and all the things that they say, the relationship between the two men, the two bears, all the bears, is a very important part of how women will see what's going on. But women have, for several decades, attempted to be inside the square, the masculine male world, and it's not always worked. It's become quite aggressive. And my goal is that we move away from that aggression and we understand the flow of all this energy. So there are particular aspects that I'd like to discuss with you, and some of them are listed here. So just keep an eye on this. If men think in squares and women think in circles, how will you create conversations? If men think of one thing at a time, task focus, and women are thinking of many, how would you have a conversation? A classic is that men tend to nod to agree and women are still going, maybe. Women tend to ask questions to invite further conversation, whereas men often ask questions for an answer. And I think this one has changed. I took this out of Dr. John Gray's book, but generally men were deemed to be more competitive. I think women have become more competitive, but we want a collaborative future. How do we make sure that everybody is appreciated? And generally, and if you don't know this, I think you'll have to maybe believe me, women tend to want to be appreciated 10 times about the same thing, whereas you might say it once. The other thing I want you just to think about is the directness and the indirectness of how we create conversations. And I'm going to, if I can find this button, is to stop my share and come back to the room. Okay, so one of the things I really wanted to point out with that, and welcome to you all, is if there's a desire for synergy, and hi Colin, Colin's coming from the UK, thank you. If our desire is for synergy, which is a coming together of all parts in a seamless, hopefully positive and proactive, energized, creative state, how do we understand each other? So I'm going to open it out to the floor, and first off, I would just like to ask you, if you only have a choice of being one or the other, and I'm not saying that you're only one or the other, which of the extremes of the men will you choose? The MM, the masculine-minded male, or the feminine-minded male? And I know of all of you here who I think would offer to be an MM. I'm going to ask Adolfo because I know he would. We have had this conversation. So what are your thoughts, Adolfo?
Yeah, I'm a masculine-minded male. I understand the spectrum. I think that there's some conversation that we need to have about how broad your intention is rather than limiting. But if you categorize yourself, yeah, I see processes. I want results. Questions are asked to get an answer, not to continue. So yeah, I agree with that segment of myself.
Okay, thank you. The reason I've asked this to all of you guys is that I asked the women. So last week, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we had the women, that's okay, Boris, we go. I asked them to choose, not because they had to be one or the other, but to give us a sense of direction as to what would happen when you're under stress. So one of the challenges is that when conversations go wrong, or there's a difficult situation, it's often that because we have gone into our corner. So when we look at the extremes of the men's style or the women's style, we can sometimes see in negative behavior where they're coming from in order to bring them back to the center. So for a feminine-minded male, an intuitive-minded male, who would like to talk about that point of view in the group here?
I'm actually just going to add, I would say I'm a masculine-minded, but I've learned feminine-minded communication skills, so I'm effective with people. So it's not my natural instinct, but I still recognize where they're coming from so I can listen and communicate in a way that resonates with them. And so in a sense, I sometimes feel like I'm putting on a hat of that, but at least it means I'm focusing on the communication aspect.
Thank you. So I like that is, when we're wise, that would say when we're enlightened, we are able to draw in both aspects of masculine and feminine in us, but we know where our natural starting place is. Who else would like to comment as coming from that intuitive, feminine-minded male? Colin, yes.
Yeah, I would put myself very much in the feminine-minded one, but under stress, then I would tend to then rise up higher. But I've never, not for as long as I can remember, seen myself at the top end in the space. And okay. I'm able to relate to males and also females.
So there's an advantage of awareness. So the challenge is, how do we create this awareness in the larger arena where men have not had this understanding?
Can I add something a little bit? Because I don't see being a masculine-minded male creates any barriers for me communicating effectively with women, right? Like I understand and are connect. So I just want to go into that, right? Because does that define a barrier? I think the whole chart has a communication barrier, right? Even if you're in the exact same sector, there's issues we have with each other. No?
So what would you say is a main issue? Can we dig out what are the misunderstandings? What's the missing link? Mainly.
Oh, well, different size squares and circles, right? I mean, humans are different, inherently different in their experience and their way of using language, and communicating is literally translating emotions to thought, to words, through the air for the other person to listen to, think about, and then feel. And we somehow believe that we're going to make the other person feel the exact same thing we felt. It's almost impossible. So I just want to ask the question, basically, that because you may be on one side of the spectrum or the other doesn't make me any more or less capable of communicating with the other people in the room, right? Those are completely different skills and where you're coming from. Or am I mistaken in the interpretation?
Yeah, oh yes, it's all about the level of skill in terms of communication. So
I had a situation recently where a woman was talking about change management, and she worked primarily with a bunch of men. And one of the things that I found in change is what people need to address with change is being really clear about their fears, because that might be something that needs to, you know, maybe your great project plan didn't incorporate that fear, or someone has a fear that you need to build trust with to say, we're going to watch to make sure that fear doesn't come into fruition. And this woman was saying, well, she works with a lot of men and they just won't talk about their fears. And it was just fascinating that she was trying to get them to use her language versus really thinking about the kind of language to get together. So I think part of what we need to do is not expect people, it's almost like forcing people to talk to you on your level versus how do we come up with a way that we communicate together.
Yes, I agree. And I'm Kenny.
I was going to come in as a bear because I would rather be bear and tell the truth about my needs, get to know them and own them and share them, and listen and be vulnerable, way beyond anything to do with male, female, masculine, feminine, etc. Because as an adult, I would take it as my responsibility that if I'm to communicate, then it's up to me that the other person understands me. So that is my extension to them, rather than this is my language, you should understand, or I will abandon me and go straight into your world and not exist in this communication. For me, as a boy, I was more raised and responsible for the emotions of the women. So I was more of a feminine boy. That's the situation I was brought up in. As I became more, as I aged, I guess, there were a lot of situations where the raw masculine needed to come out because of situation. And that was a lot more masculine. So I would say I can be the both, depending, and I'm not sure that I was stuck in the feminine type of male that I was. Things had fundamentally shifted, and I have lost my attention span. I didn't think I could change that much. I didn't mean to. And also with that, I kind of find that I wonder how much of this is also to do with class and education, because it's not just the women who didn't get the vote, the working class men didn't get the vote, and it had to do with land. It has to do with education and opportunity as well. Then I'd say a lot of power comes from there, unless you're fighting for food, and then it might be the more masculine, muscular farm types that are going to be the strongest rather than writing the laws.
Yes. I was going to ask everybody is that if we start to learn, as we all do, that we can shift, we can use masculine and feminine energy from our baseline, how do we teach the rest of the world to do this? Because we know that there are difficulties out there between men and women, and within each gender set, between women and women for sure, and men and women. And the old order has been, in the business world, especially in the corporate world, very much male control. That the story that you all have is the powerful, intelligent, and enlightened male. And I meet many, many women who are enlightened, but we know there are still huge arguments and polar opposites in how we are treated. Just to give an example, for instance, a classic situation with a client is where women are sitting around a table with men, maybe there are more men than women, and she's got a really great idea. She wants to get her voice heard. She starts to say it, and she gets cut dead by the boss, maybe, who's a man, who's saying, no, we're not doing that now. And maybe he uses slightly brusque words. What he doesn't mean is you're irrelevant, but she hears it as I'm irrelevant. and I'm being put down. And I know this story many, many times for women, and I'm not saying any of you do this, but I teach women how to manage that situation by honoring the difference between the whole map. Is there a situation which with the other way around, where men feel any of you feel you're misunderstood by women?
Pauline, I think, I mean, to teach that, I think we really need to get to the ground level and teach people manners, right? There's issues in power hungry struggle managers that just get a title and believe somehow that they are entitled to step on people, right? I mean, this is male talking about reporting to males and having no longer any wish to put my spirit or passion behind a certain person because of his way of approaching the room or myself, right? And HR trainings galore about sexual harassment, where I would just like roll my eyes back and go, yeah, I can't stop winking. I'm sorry. I don't mean anything by it, right? And it was really obtuse the way that you would go to one extreme about fear, about being able to relate to women, make them laugh, and nobody's flirting. Like, I don't even understand what you're trying to protect. And then the other end, allowing complete and utter abandonment of manners when it has to do with management of people. And I think if we actually go to the baseline and realize that people need to treat each other with respect, that it is not acceptable, even as a boss, to go, oh yeah, we're not doing that, and just blow stuff off. You have other adults in the room. We have to learn to play together to grow, and whoever needs to work on meditation or breathing techniques to be able to address other people in the room with respect, yes, then just my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And
I've often, though, yeah, I just want to add to what you're saying. I've often said, especially in the world of diversity, inclusion, like, I don't know how often people are doing things because they're being discriminatory or they're just jerks to everybody. And we happen to put the label on who our identity happens to be, that they think it's an ism towards that. So I think there is a piece on when are people just jerks, bad communicators, versus there's something, sexism or something else going on.
I agree. But I noticed, Barry, you said in the, why can't we see the difference as beautiful and appreciated? Absolutely. That I believe the goal is, when you put in manners and create a conversation, magical conversation where there's no judgment, it's allowing people to come into the space between us in order to be themselves, but feel okay and not feel they'd be put down by maybe a natural bias. Philip, I was going to ask your view on the conversation so far in terms of how we see magical conversations.
Yeah.
Philip works with me in Corporate Heart.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I suppose there is a couple of things, a few strands I want to bring together in order to help us get our heads around what the map is attempting to do, because it feels as if you're trying to stick yourself on the map and polarize yourself in one spot. And you're also saying, but I can deal with my feminine energy and my masculine energy. And that's great, because that is about the fluidity of the energy. But it's also about your naturalness as a man. So you are a man and you are not a woman. So therefore there's a different energy attached to that. And again, it's not about it not being able to be fluid, but you are fixed on the male side of the map. That's how it works. The ability to talk to different people at different levels by listening to how they speak, learning how they are. So you're looking at all sorts of manners of connecting with people, is about the enlightened men. And I get when you're an adult, and asking for manners. However, I work with clients who don't work like that. I work with clients who are essentially what everyone would call a bully. And part of that, and this new strand for me, is about people do what works. It's Dr. Philip McGraw. If you've ever read any of his work, he talks about people do what works. And what happens is we learn a way to achieve something through other people, And whilst it works, we keep doing it. So if we learn, if we shout at someone, they will go away and do what we've asked them to do, then we learn that that's what works. So why would we do it any other way? What's the purpose of that for us? Where's the gain? There isn't one. So we keep shouting until we shout at someone who turns around and says, actually, no, I'm not letting you talk to me like that. I'm just as good as anyone else. I'm capable of doing what you're asking, but I'm not going to do it if you're going to treat me like that. And once that's mentioned, the person who's telling me, let's say it's me who's the person standing up saying, no, not prepared to be treated like that. The other person doesn't know how to handle that because they've learned the one way that works for them. And now they don't have a backup plan. They don't know what to do with me because I've said, no, not having that. You're not talking to me like that. I'm happy to do what you want, but you need to find a different way to talk to me to get it. And that's when we start to look at what happens when things don't operate. So in the magical conversation, we are expecting respect. We are expecting that people will bring their humanity to the table, but we have to remember lots and lots and lots of people don't have that opportunity, either at home or in the workplace, either with their friends or in any other social situation. And that's why I was talking about the different strands. We have to understand that we are more enlightened than most people. That's why the map's as a base point. It helps people see where they are on it and the fact that they are on it, because for a lot of people who feel disenfranchised, they don't consider themselves part of the community. For some reason, they think they're outside of that. And the map says, no, you're not. Everyone is on it somewhere. It's just a case of choosing a spot, but it isn't a fixed spot. And that's the whole point about it. And there's a phrase I use with Pauline called simple complexity and complex simplicity. And we need to start with the simple complexity, because if you understand the basic rules, then you can expand them to become more complex. And interestingly, when things are really complex, it actually becomes really simple. So I think of that like a computer, like a piece of software which can be interrogated to provide information. If you only put in, I only need to know yes and no, there's a very simple response to a computer. Either it will say it's yes or no. If, however, you've got tons and tons of information and you want to be able to translate that into lots of things, you need to make it very, very small. Each piece of information needs to be small first so that you can sort it in 300 different ways. So the complexity is in the sorting, the simplicity is in I press a button asking for these things and out comes the answer. That's how I see the map. The map is a very simple way to understand where you might be on it, but the complexity comes from understanding all the different elements of the map and then how we move in to start to talk to people. Because you're right, not everyone responds the same way. We don't all talk the same language. Very easy example of that is a visual auditory kinesthetic. People talk visually or auditorily or kinesthetically. If you don't choose their words to help understand you've listened, you lose them. If you look at NLP, we're either internally referenced or externally referenced. We can tell ourselves we've done a good job, or we look to others to say, oh, that was brilliant, well done. It's about understanding how each of us operates, and we all know how to do some of all of those things, because that's why we're here. What we need to be doing is looking at how can we help other people start these conversations so that they're able to move towards a more synergistic approach towards anything, whether that's business or life. And that's where I see what you've done so far, Pauline. That's what I wanted to say about where I think we as a group have started to go in terms of understanding the map. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if I could give an example that might help. I know Boris put it as an MM. I wonder if as an MF, that's the philosopher, is easy to relate and communicate to feminine females. I would agree. In my experience, the the masculine male, when he's maybe a bit unwise and he's on task and he's trying to get something done, is more abrupt and bullet point. I had a very interesting conversation with an MM who was throwing bullet points at me, and when I tried to go off at a tangent, he actually said to me, "Pauline, you don't realize we're not having a conversation, I'm talking at you." And it brought me abrupt, and it was such a fantastic example because he said what he was being truly honest about. So instead of being maybe a reactionary female and going, "Oh," I just stopped talking and went, "Okay." I applauded what he had done in the program. I said, if we work together, it would depend on my client. And then I stopped talking. I answered his bullet points, and inside I was really annoyed, as you might guess, but I didn't display it. But what it gave me a really good example of different styles. And there may be women who wouldn't have coped with that in the same way. Would FMs, in my experience, intuitive-minded men are more likely to have lengthier conversations with women than maybe masculine males are, especially when they're on task. And it's about learning, as Philip said, different languages. So I had an example of a masculine male who was very enlightened, but he wasn't getting on very well with his FF daughter because he was telling her what to do. And when we worked through the map, we found that if by asking her and sitting beside her, he get a better response, he would do it, but he wasn't aware of the differences until he did it. So a lot of this is about having the experience to gain the center ground of manners, because I know that a lot of women do not feel safe in a room where there are more men, and they're very business focused, let's put it that way, that they feel they don't get their voice heard. So the goal is to understand ourselves, as Philip says, and then understand the map. Now, I'd like to ask to those who haven't said anything yet, your comment on what you have heard so far and what you feel. So, Knut.
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, I'm curious if we ask ourselves, what is beyond genders when we really are genetic together? I have invented, so to say, a description of the new leader, and that is a conductor of creative energy. And somehow, when you ask me, I don't like to be put into any box. And then I see that to be an intuitive ruler in the middle. And I have seen, as you say, because maybe, yes, I know that I have some feminine qualities because I have an artistic background, you know, and worked creatively. And because I work with Global Renaissance Society and a new global renaissance, it is about a new society. How do we lay the foundation for a new society, a new community building, a new business? And then the synergy between the male and female on the higher level of human consciousness is at the core of what we want to develop. In the first Renaissance, the Renaissance man, I talk about the man now, the Renaissance man was both a statesman and a poet. They shifted, they played with all kinds of energies, and they played with other people in the society, whatsoever background they had. So that was at the core of the success in the first Renaissance, that they gathered together different people from all parts of society and came up with a kind of leadership and collective intelligence that turned the whole Western world upside down. So somehow, for me, this is also about the question, how is the new man? Because we are living in a shift, a consciousness shift. There is no question that we can go back to the old normal. But at the same time, we are bridging, we are in between of something. So I think that is also part of this discussion on how we can come together and create, you know, a new understanding of what is it to be this new man, meeting this new woman as well.
Well, I agree, and it's a really good point, and I want to get everybody else's point of view, because we're on a journey, aren't we? And one of the comments in the chat, which is important, is that we're all ahead of the game because we're here and we're thinking about this. It's how do we send very clear, simple messages out? Because there's a comment there, when we're under stress, we go to our corner, and that's where what we would maybe call bad behavior or toxic behavior comes out. And in my experience, if I look at the 4 corners of the map, and then there are only examples, the under stress becomes far more, I need action. And the FM often, and those of you on the call, will go internal, and back off, go into their thinking mode. The FF, and so if you want to think about women, the FF sovereign becomes very protective and very territorial. Don't come on my patch unless you're really going to be careful. And the magician, the MF like me, goes, dare I say, oh, get out of my space. I'm just going to get on, do what I need to do, to anybody. So we're reacting in different ways under stress. And what you're saying, is that we need to get on a journey towards a higher level understanding of everybody.
If I could put out there, that last conversation made me think about, even wondering how much of this is MF, FF, all that stuff. But I think about all the studies that have been shown about charisma. Charisma, one of the ways that people define that is people feel like the energy is given to them. They feel heard. They feel like the charismatic person is a mind reader because they're saying things that are in their thoughts. Like, is it really MF, or is it really just getting skills and being more charismatic? Because there's people who can be charismatic in most rooms that they're in.
Well, I'd like to pick that point up and see what else somebody thinks. Is that, and Barry, Lloyd, Terry, who haven't spoken yet, when we're all in our higher consciousness, then you're all higher level men. You manage the situation with that ability to be flexible with who's in the room. You're not in your corner. And the same with women. So it says, like Knut says, it's the Renaissance man and the Renaissance woman. But at the moment, we're down at the ground level with everybody arguing and fighting still, not here in this group, fortunately, which is why we're here, but out there in the universe. In business, where panic is setting in, crisis, the task needs doing. Do the men hurry on and do the tasks and the women get behind? Do they get argumentative? I had a class where I was teaching women or showing them this map, and I invited them to share how would they deal with the slightly aggressive, stressed masculine male. So not any of you. And the MFs, the women like me, said, oh, we just go and batter him with our ideas. And the feminine female said, we'll go and make him more emotional. So neither of those were probably the solution. No, but that's where they were coming from, because they were coming from their own point of view. So it's about understanding the people who are not as wise as us. How do we create the understanding by using the map as a baseline? As when they get elevated to that higher level, we won't have these issues to deal with, but we're a long way from that. So I wanted to ask Barry what your thoughts were on that, because you've written quite a few points in the chat.
I came on the call. Well, I came on the call because I was looking forward to the conversation about the masculine and feminine, and I felt really boxed into a categorization that I don't agree with, and
okay.
So I'm just wanting to be present and learn and contribute. And I'm just not sure how best to do that. I feel like, I mean, the whole labeling, and the point that we're fixed, and I don't see that at all as the case. I feel like talking about men are like this and women are like that, men are from Mars or whatever, was written in the 80s. There's a lot of that's been debunked and made like ridiculous in terms of generalizations and stereotyping. But I think the point about talking about difference and distinctions, and yeah, is an interesting one. I mean, there's infinite things I could respond to, but I'm not feeling, I mean, I'm just owning this, I'm not feeling resonant with where we're going.
Okay, well that's good, and I'm very glad that you're honest about that, because if this is new to you, then it is about understanding that the map is about exploring the map and moving around from a point to another point like a GPS. So thank you for that, and stick with it, Barry, because I know that you have add value to this conversation. I'm going to ask Terry, who is also only very new to this map, what you're thinking, Terry.
Thanks, Pauline. Excuse me. Thanks, Pauline. Hi, guys. Thanks for bringing me on board. As some of you know, that I run a small little foundation, and it focuses on young people. And the reason why we do that is because I think a lot of problems that we face, including what we're discussing, stems from parenting. So I'm a parent. I've got 4 kids. And I'm also raised with a set of parents who brought me up, fortunately, to be balanced. Because most parents would bring up, say, young boys to say, you are a man, you mustn't cry. You've got to take it on the chin, stiff upper lip, and a whole host of different things. And that child will grow up to be this very masculine person. At the same time, for women, especially in Asia, they'll say things like, oh, go make sure that when you are an adult, you go look for a beautiful wife, a beautiful husband, or a husband that will take care of you. So the point being, parents already stigmatize or put us in little boxes. And if we don't address that, we've got a problem. So for us at Humanity Inc., what we do is we focus on getting people to function, young people to function from a place of love rather than a place of lack. Because once you get into a place of lack, then you are powered by the ego. And as you grow older, that ego gets stronger, whichever route it takes, whether it's a boy or a girl, becomes, a person, an adult that's driven from ego. And no matter what categorization you're going to put on, that becomes a very serious problem. So hence, let's do a little bit of a backtrack. I'm a strong believer that all of us have to have yin and yang. We are born divinely with a yin and yang. Unfortunately, with the way industrial development has come about, that whole balance has moved. And okay, I'm going to step into a little bit of a woo area here, but bear with me. We are believers that every human being was designed to be agro-based or agrarian, and that's what our forefathers were. And the reason why we were agrarian, simply because we lived off the land. We were in touch with Mother Nature, with Gaia. And by doing that, we had a beautiful balance of divine feminine and divine masculine energy throughout our lives. But unfortunately, with industrialization and development, we moved from agrarian into, high-rise. I live in the high-rise apartment, into tower blocks where we work, into machines, and we start to lose that part of the balance. And this is not just men, this is women as well. So once that balance is off, then you have people who are functioning from a place of lack. So hence the Me Too movement, I found, has gone the other way around, where women now think that they are so badly maligned that they need to push their voice out. And that does the opposite with the male community, thinking, hang on, why are you so aggressive? And then, so it actually exacerbates the problem rather than solve it. So our address has always been with younger people. And what we get them to do is look at bringing out the best of humanity in them. And that's what I bring to the table. Bringing out the greater sense of humanity.
Yeah, And I think I want to pause you because absolutely you're on par. That's the message that I want. And I think we're all thinking that message, and I'm just aware of the time. I'm glad that some people are challenging what this is about, but it is always moving towards that higher level of consciousness where synergy enables us, and to reference your point, Barry, as well, is that this is a journey from the unaware to the aware. And I know some of the contests that women have in the world, that they are challenged by what is going on, and that they don't feel their voice is being heard, and likewise with men. So I think what I want to be sure of is that in terms of the map, and to get to you in a minute, Kenny, the map is there to help us have magical conversations where we can explore who we are in honesty without being kicked out. And one of the reasons that many people love the map is that everybody is somewhere. So just being everywhere is somewhere, like with the LGBT community, for instance, and with people who have been marginalized or got out of balance. We've swung from a very male background to a female background to back into the balance. And the balance is what we're going for. The balance is a higher level consciousness where we're all biologically male, female. So I'm not putting you in hopefully not putting people in a box, but biologically there are references to behavior, and we all have a use of masculine and feminine energy, and we have a potential to get it right sometimes and wrong sometimes. And my goal is that by understanding the map more, and those of you who don't know and understand the map as much as you can do, that we have a private conversation after this. But to be assured that the goal is the higher level consciousness where we have communities which are based on love and not fear, on honest emotions and shared spaces. And we have come to the top of the hour. Clay has just arrived I think maybe we missed the time zone with you, Clay, because we started an hour ago.
Yeah, it's on me. I think I wrote it down wrong. I apologize for that.
One of the things I do want to do as we come to the top of the hour is that this conversation is ongoing, and I really want all of you, and I know many of you have connected with each other, is to connect with each other around the world. We have got Australia here. We've got Alan, who's still at now nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. We have KB in India. We have those of you, there's Terry in Malaysia, there's people in America, there's Barry and Lloyd and Adolfo, Clay, Colin and Kenny and Philip are in the UK. This is really important, and Barry, you're in the UK. It's really important to keep this conversation going because it's a necessity. I know that women, and I have the women's group coming up next week, and I will share their conversation with you as well. The women are challenged by many things about being women in this world, and with different levels of masculine and feminine energy. So remember, the map is 2 layers. The male-female is not saying it's not a label, it's a baseline. The masculine and feminine energy is what we are bringing together, the yin and the yang. When do we use it right? When do we use it wrong? When do we want to have conversations that have no judgment, no anger, no coercion? That's what magical conversation is about. It's about understanding this flow. Some of you have not had a chance to say anything. We are at the top of the hour, but we're very happy to continue this conversation. I know, Kenny, you put your hand up. Is there anything, or Alan, who hasn't spoken, or Lloyd, who haven't said anything? I know Boris has got a problem with his sound. Is there anything you want to say very succinctly at this moment as we come to the top of the hour?
I'd like to address your question of how to get the MMs to take part and extend themselves. And in my experience, when there is pain or when there is something in it for them, especially in my experience, when they're about to lose their children or when they have to fight for their children, that's when I have seen MM shift.
Okay, good point. Alan?
That's a very specific example.
Lloyd, yes.
It's a very, very powerful situation. And the press of men and their children that I was brought up with is very, very different to what I've witnessed. And that is the most hardened-up men and the most feminine men, and the way that men fall in love with their children is not what I was led to believe, but it's certainly what I've experienced.
Yes. And when we're facing challenges and difficulties, this is where we will go to our corner. We will use everything to protect what we're doing, but also to remember the whole map is to understand everybody. Alan, is there anything you want to say? I know you haven't.
Yeah, well, you were saying before, well, as Kenya was saying, absolutely agree. People will do things when things are in their interest. We all do. One of the things is when we're on a radio, we tune our receiver into the radio, the transmitter, because we want to hear. When we're trying to communicate with somebody, we want them to hear. So we've got to actually tune our transmitter into their receiver. So we need to understand how they receive information, how they want to be spoken to. So for the guys who don't know me, I'm a profiler. I teach people how to read other people and then change the way they like to be spoken to match the way the other person needs to be spoken to. If you want to get your message across, it has to be in their way. Yes, you can yell at them and that might work, but you're not going to get the full result, because people who you force to do things will still be of the same mind, even though they've agreed with you. But they haven't really changed at all. They just do that to quieten the whole thing down. So as Kenny was saying, the masculine, and I don't think it's just the MMs, it's across the board, but probably more so with them, but they have to realize that there's something more in it for them if they change. It's not about teaching people manners, because people, you're telling them they've got to learn manners, they've got to want to learn it. So you've got to find the thing that causes them to be interested in making a change. And the way to do that is to show them that, hey, the way you're doing it, you're getting certain results, but these are greater results you can get if you do it this way. And you guide them in that way.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And that's, if we get the wins, when people actually understand. So just an example to finish with, that gentleman who didn't get on with his FF daughter, he changed a very simple thing. Instead of telling her what to do, he asked her. He sat beside her. He reported back to me a month later, my God, my relationship has changed 100%, 1000%, purely because I changed one piece of language. And he then said, and also I understand my son better, which we weren't talking about. So laying the seed with the map is my passion, our passion. And what we would love to know is, and we're doing this with MY-CEO, we're taking this map into talk with MMs, FMs, MFs, all of them, about how we do it. And it's a longer process, but it's important, and we really want to know how you can help us share the map with the world, because that is our passion, certainly my legacy. And I've got maybe another 30 years. You've got to help me, guys. I want to make sure that we don't need the map, because we are so aware of what happens when we have gone into our corner and things have gone wrong. Is there anybody else who would like to share something? And I know, Clay, you've just joined us. We are 5 minutes over the hour, and I would like to honor your time. But if you want to.
No, I'm late. I'll pass for now. Thank you.
Okay, but thank you for coming in, and KB, thank you for coming in from India. I would like you to set an intention that the map it's called Gender Dynamic Intelligence, because it's about the intelligence with which we use it to become the Renaissance man, the Renaissance woman, to become real synergy, to help people when they're in a stuck situation and they don't know how to deal with it. I would also love to work with the younger generation, and with Terry, maybe we can work with the kids and looking at that with certain people, because kids are very instinctive. And if you look at the playground, you will see the masculine-minded little boy and the feminine-minded boy. You'll see the masculine-minded girl and the feminine-minded female, and all the shades and all the colors in between. what I hope we've done is to give you food for thought, and I would very much appreciate your views. Maybe one-on-one we can speak at another time, but thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that.
Thank you,
and
Pauline.
our goal is to help change the world.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting us. This is a great conversation.
Good to see you all.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Pauline.
Grazie.
Bye. Bye, Pauline.
Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.